Hello, Kingdom people. It is your Kingdom Child Care Provider, Miss Taisha. Today is a day about conversation with Miss Ruth Ann Zimmerman about Kingdom children need chores. Kingdom children need chores. So everybody, come on in, come on in, come on in. I'm super excited about this conversation, y'all. Hey, I'm super excited. Just a little bit of housekeeping. So I have y'all questions from the question box that I posted yesterday. I have your questions from that. For the sake of time, I need you to put your questions in the question box on this live. If you have any additional questions that you want me to ask, put it in the question box for the sake of time and efficiency. Okay. So we're going to let y'all come in for like 1 minute. I am doing a giveaway. So Miss Ruth Zimmerman has a book that at the end, I'm going to do a giveaway with her book. It is so good, y'all. When I tell you, I have, you see all my highlights, I have been in this book. So it's so good. I'm going to bring her on so we can get started. And let's pray I do this the correct way. Okay. All right. I think I hit her wave. Now I've done this before. Now, oh, there we go. I just mixed up my stuff. And then she should come on in a minute. Let's hope. Hi.
This
Hello.
works.
Let me some
It
volume up.
works.
It works. You know, technology. You never know.
Right? Hang on. I gotta clean my camera lens.
Hmm.
Okay, there we go.
How are you this morning?
I am good. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for accepting this invitation. I'm not one, I don't get excited over celebrities. I don't get excited over the people on the screens. I get excited for the people that I meet that are doing God's work.
Oh, thank you.
So I was nervous pitching you, and I was so excited when you said, when you agreed to it. So thank you for agreeing.
Well, you're welcome. You have my husband to thank for that because he takes care of my emails and then he'll star the ones that he thinks I might want to see. So he starred yours and I'm like,
Oh, thank
"Oh,
you.
this is interesting." I rarely turn down a chance to talk about touching the lives of our children
Awesome.
for the kingdom.
I, oh my gosh. Well, thank you to your husband, Mr. Elvin, right?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Um, a little bit about Miss Ruth is that she is a mother of 7, right? And
Yes.
a new grandbaby, and a
Yes.
wife, and a homesteader. Okay. So I came across your content last summer on YouTube as I was diving into learning how to can. And I came across your canning videos, and then I watch all of your content, everything. Like, I watched every single thing on your channel. I had my family in here watching everything, and they were like, girl, what is going on? So I have learned so much from your channel. And then when I saw your way of teaching your children about work, I said, oh Lord, she gets it. Because I rarely come across people who actually get it when it comes to teaching children about work, especially God's way of work. A lot of times, just so you know, I think I told you that. So I'm a child care provider,
Yes,
and
you did.
I've been doing this for 17 plus years. And a lot of time, the idea of children working is like, what? Like, no, they're going to get in the way. Oh no, they can't do that. They're too young, because I have children 5 and under. And when I saw your way of teaching your children, specifically your boys, how to work, I was just so gravitated towards it. It was so almost like confirming, even though I've been doing this for a long time, I never see other people, especially mothers specifically, in the home carrying this out. So can you tell a little bit about how did that begin for you, or was it always so? 'Cause I know you have older girls.
Um, so a lot of our story begins, 17, 18 years ago, because my husband and I were Old Order Mennonites,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very close-knit, it's a culture. And
Mm-hmm.
and you don't, because you have no media, and the schools are separate and the church is separate, and you speak a different language. We didn't have a lot of opportunity to see what the modern world works like. So when we were 27 years old and we had two children, we left that culture. Basically, we met Jesus and we had to go where we found his presence, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when we left the Mennonite culture, we started noticing the difference between the modern world, the way their children are raised. And I don't mean this in any, I don't mean any disrespect. This is our personal journey. And through this journey, we kind of were, picking up things that we wanted from the modern world. But through that, God kind of showed us there was some very, very valuable things from the Mennonite
Yeah.
culture, and so children work
Mm-hmm.
ethic was the biggest thing, and self-discipline. Work
Mm-hmm.
ethic and self-discipline is the biggest thing that we noticed that the modern world's children lacked,
Mm-hmm.
and that the Mennonite children had. So my husband and I looked back at our childhood and we were like, what was the one thing that build work ethic in us that we can do for our children? And we were, of course, both raised on farms. So we were like, well, chores. We had to get up and do chores before we ate breakfast, before
Yeah.
we went to school, and not,
Yeah.
it weren't just little chores. They were milking the cows and, feeding the calves and things like that. So that's how kind of our homestead got started, with the desire to have our then preschool age daughters have animals to care for. And so we didn't, when you're young parents, you feel like you're just blindly walking. You don't really
Mm-hmm.
know how it's going to look, but you just do the one thing. And the one thing we knew is we needed animals, so our children would have chores, something to care for. And you don't have to have animals to instill work ethic, but that's the only thing we knew because we were raised on
Mm-hmm.
farms. Um, but it worked. It worked the way we thought it would. Even though we didn't have a whole culture
Mm-hmm.
surrounding us like we would have had we still been in the Mennonite world, we were able to say, well, this is what we want to do differently than the modern world.
Yeah.
And that is, our children will have chores, they will know how to work. Um, and then the extra blessing that came from that was there's so many character qualities that came. It's like work ethic and self-discipline is like the base layer, and all the other character qualities that grow children into being men and women of God can build on that skill of self-discipline, because to have work ethic, you need self-discipline. You need
Yes.
to be able to say, I need to go milk those cows regardless of how much I want to stay in my bed. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of that's kind of the our why behind, and it has, and then of course, as our family grew, and now being older parents and having the concentration of those three little boys at the end of our family, it has really helped to cement everything in me. Because when you have a large family, you get to do that 2-year-old stage 7 times.
Mm-hmm.
So you get to fine tune everything,
Yeah.
and really work on, what, I know that this is a developmental stage. We're going to make it through this.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't seem huge, and I got to do that 2-year-old stage 7 times.
Yeah. 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 I love that. I love that. First of all, I love that you and your husband was intentional. It was an intentional decision, and that you actually saw the difference, because there is a clear difference. You know, modern day children who are being raised in modern day, it's different. And sadly, it's become to where the body of Christ is not separate. It's the same. So just like how you said you've done it 7 times, because I've been in this industry for 17 years, I've literally done this stage of twos and threes multiple times. Sometimes at one time you have multiple children, and then it's for year to year. So I've been able to fine tune it and be able to see, okay, first of all, what's the difference of the things I need them to know that they can grasp versus the development. So you mentioned the development. Now your book is great because first of all, it's broken down by age, and it's broken down by age and the, I guess, like the reasonable expectation of that age. Was there ever anything that you saw was you have the development, but then you have the will?
Hmm.
How did you handle that where you have the will of the child and then you have the development where you're like, I know that you can do this? You touched on it a little bit in your book. So how do you handle when you know a child can do something developmentally, and even just as mom, right? You know what they can do, but yet their will is not bending.
So it's a very typical, and when I do, and I'll speak, I have a homestead conference to go to this weekend, and I'll be speaking on childhood chores.
Mm-hmm.
And you can feel when I say the stages. So the very first stage is willing but not able,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's your preschool age. You all know this. And but when I mentioned the next stage, the able but not willing
Mm-hmm.
stage, you can feel the moms breathe a sigh because they're like, "Oh, it's real.
It's
It's a
real.
stage. It's
Mm-hmm.
real, and I'm not alone." And this stage, I have three of them in this stage right now,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very, very intense. Um, and like basically for my boys who are in this able but not willing stage, it comes down to the character quality of self-discipline,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes a long time to develop, self-discipline. And I have to do what is right before I do what feels
Feels
good to
good.
me.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and so for my boys who are 8 and 9 and 12, and those of you that have children, close in age, and especially all the same gender, that can cause a stage to last a lot longer because they feeding off of
Yes.
their peers,
Yes.
and they're copying off of each other.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really hard to get my 12-year-old to rise, to where
Mm-hmm.
I need him to be because he's always run
Other.
with the
Yeah.
pack, and
Mm-hmm.
they're younger, right? So it's kind of like this. But I'm seeing glimpses of him rising up and being the voice of reason
Mm-hmm.
and saying, we need to do this. But we do something called chore checks where they have to come and they have to tell me what they've done. Instead of me reminding them, hey, did you gather the eggs? Did you check the calves' water? Things like that. They have to come to me and say everything that they've
Mm-hmm.
done, and this create helps them create a mental checklist. And oftentimes, I'll require eye contact,
Mm-hmm.
and for boys,
Yes.
that's almost, hey, look
Yeah.
at me when you're, saying, they'll say, okay, I gathered the eggs, and then they'll be like, oh, you know what? I forgot to check the calves' water, and they'll remind
Mm-hmm.
themselves, and they'll go back. So if you have the that where they're able but they're not don't have the self-discipline, I would do chore checks. And then the other thing is when they pretend, it's that feigned incompetence, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
they
Oh
want
yeah,
you
I
to
read that in your book.
believe that they can't.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, once you recognize it for what it is, it takes all the frustration out of it, because
Mm-hmm.
I simply say, oh, I hear you saying that although you're able to do this, because I know you are, because you did it when you were 5 and you did it perfectly, but now that you're 8, I hear that you're saying that this chore is too hard. So why don't you sit here until you're ready to go and we'll see how you get it done. And if it's not done correctly, you'll just do it over until you learn because
Mm,
practice is what you need. So you just like it takes all the frustration out when
yeah.
you play their game along with them. And sometimes the little thing of saying, I hear you saying that this chore is too hard. Even if they are just, whining,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
not literally saying to put words to their feelings
Right.
and say, I hear you saying this chore is too hard. So let's go, see how you do it. And then if you need more practice, and my boys know, my children all know that more practice is a form of discipline because it just
Yes.
means I have to do it
Yep.
over and over and
Yep.
over. So it take like remembering sometimes my reaction while I have to check myself, why am I frustrated? And
Hmm.
then if oh, because they're pretending they can't do something that I know they can, like sometimes I have to think through it so that I don't react instead of just
Yeah.
responding.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's good. A lot of times, when I read that in your book, I said, "Oh, I do a form of that too," because I'll tell them something that they did that was similar to what you're now telling me that you can't do. But I just saw you do X, Y, and Z, and you seem like you did that very, very well. So how come now, like, is this, make it make sense in the kind of a way so that fame, what you call it, fame and
Feigning
competence,
competence,
it is
yes.
so real, and it kind of can, if lack of a better term, drive parents bananas. So, because you're like, I know you know how to do it, and now you're pretending that you don't. You know, when you get into the work world where now, like I'm hiring staff, adults do the same thing. Adults do the same thing. So it's good to handle that when they're younger, so you don't have to deal
It's
with it when
true.
they're adults.
And my boys are now the age where I will tell them, you know what this would look like in the
Mm,
workforce. Like your daddy is a foreman. Let's ask him when somebody
yeah.
pretends they can't do something, what happens? You
Mm-hmm.
know, and just the same as, getting their piano books ready and being on time. Let's talk about what this would look like if you were an
Mm-hmm.
adult. You start with the dialogue
Mm-hmm.
early, and I know there's this real popular movement that kids should be kids, right? And I'm here to say that you cannot make kids grow up before their time. Like, they are going to be kids because developmentally,
Mm-hmm.
that's who they are. But we can start a dialogue because you know what happens? They become 18, they don't value the words that come out of mom and dad's mouth
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
they do when they're 8. So
Yeah.
we can start a dialogue. We're not holding them to some unreachable standard.
Mm-hmm.
We are simply creating a dialogue that becomes part of who they are long before they're 18.
Yeah. Oh, that's so, so good because then it's like you said, it becomes a part of who they are. It's a part of their thought process, a part of the decision making. Now it's ingrained in them. So that leads me to the question of, so your book starts the breakdown of chores at 2. And some people are like 2 year olds helping around the house. Or what can they do? But I love the way that you break it down. Can you explain a little bit of introducing chores to a 2 year old?
Well, I actually think the base level of chores starts long before they're 2, and here's how I think it starts. We as a culture in the modern world have begun to think that babies are a distraction from our work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my grandson will tell you differently. He is not yet 11-month-old, and he's not interested in toys or anything unless somebody is there with him. And if I'm in the kitchen, he needs to be right there. He is so interested in what we are doing
Mm-hmm.
that that's where it starts. Like safety, like moms have common sense. We have to trust our instincts when it comes to keeping our babies safe in the kitchen. Never put up a baby gate. You bring them in, and I know if you follow my Instagram, you've seen that he sits
Yeah.
on the counter when I wash dishes.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
understands. that I give him some things to play with, but here's my my soap dispenser.
Mm-hmm.
I let him pull it apart and play with it. It's not a big deal. I tell him not to put it in his mouth, and is it fun for me? It's it's like I need 8 arms,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but when it's possible and I only have, a few dishes to wash, like 10 minutes is his attention span before he'll dive into the dishwater or whatever, I'm gonna bring him because when you send the children the message, when you send your babies and toddlers the message that they are an important part of whatever you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's laundry or dish unloading the dishwasher, if you send them the message that they are an important part of what you are doing, they will always know that they are needed. Our
Yeah.
youngest son is now 8, and from the time he could walk, he started walking at 8 month old. Um, he demanded that he go to the barn to help milk the cow.
Mm-hmm.
He just assumed that responsibility, and if I went without him, he was so upset. He just thought that he is part of the
Mm-hmm.
equation. So that's why I say it starts at 2. At 11 month old, they don't really help, but at 2, they can put spoons in the drawer. They
Yeah.
can, and they love to be part of it. This is the willing but not able stage.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to cash in on this stage because then when they do become able, they already know that they're needed. You don't have to try
Yeah.
to convince them then that they are needed as part of the family.
Yeah. There's a quote, I remember Dr. Dobson, I'm not sure if you know him.
Yeah.
Um, he said, and I heard this when I was a child, that he said that we have to stop creating worlds around children and invite children into our world. So everything doesn't have to be like childproof every single thing,
Yeah.
because then now you have them to adapt to this very unrealistic world that caters to them, instead of having inviting them into the world that's already established before they were even here, and helping
Mhm.
them to learn how to grow in that world. So I
It's
love that. I
I
love that.
think when we create a child-centered home, or what you were explaining,
Hmm.
we create entitled adults. Like the world needs to cater to me. They need to
Hmm.
cater to what I want. And that it's just really the lack of self-discipline is what it
Hmm.
is.
That's so good. And we're not saying that, like you said, moms know. If you work with children, you know. Um, we're not saying to have an unsafe space. We're not saying unsafe, especially if you're a child care provider, you all better make sure you're still doing what the law tells you to do. But within those parameters that you have, there has to be a freedom, in which you're teaching them that everything isn't going to be about you. For example, my this is my schoolroom. On the other side is my kitchen, and most people was, and I did for a couple of years. I had a safety gate, and I took my safety gate down, and I began to teach the children the boundaries between the schoolroom and the kitchen. And I don't have no problem. I haven't had a gate in about, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years. And they have learned the boundary. So, what you're talking really about is children learning the boundary, that everything isn't about you, right? We're going to make sure that you're safe, but everything isn't about you. So, they're not going to grow up and be children to think that, be adults to think that everything is catered towards them when they go into these other spaces and it becomes all about them. So I love that.
It's it's the skill of self-discipline, the character quality of self-discipline begins so young. Like my grandson at 11 month old, in my kitchen, he knows which cupboards. I have a lower cupboard that has glass dishes in.
Hmm.
And I've just told him, no, you can't have that. It'll break. Those dishes are glass. I act like he's 4 years old,
Hmm.
speak to him, and
Yes.
he'll go to it and he'll open it and he'll look at me and I'll say, "No, you can't have that one." And almost always he will turn and leave it. So it's been very fun to, because with my last three babies, it was survival mode. And talking about a child-centered home, it's really, really hard to not have a child-centered home. Let's put it this way. If you have multiple children in the same age and stage, especially when they're toddlers, your home is going to be
Mm-hmm.
child-centered. You're going to put glass dishes up.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be, what are the babies? Oh no, we can't do that. It's the baby's nap time. You're going to have a child-centered home much more than if you have one or two and you have eyes on them,
Right.
90% of
Mm-hmm.
their waking hours. When you have three, you can't have eyes on all of them, and you may have to put up gates for a while for,
Mm-hmm.
safety. But there's going to be a time when you're going to have to start expecting that they understand what I'm saying,
Mm-hmm.
and they either choose to be like, okay, I have to walk away, or they choose to disobey,
Mm-hmm.
or they choose to, and but that's how self-discipline develops,
Yeah. Yeah.
is with boundaries. You cannot develop the character quality of self-discipline in a home without boundaries.
Mm-hmm. So I heard you say you talk to your grandson like a 4-year-old. So you're not going to say, "Excuse me, no, 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 no." Like you're not
No,
doing that.
no. He
And
he
expecting him
lives.
to listen.
And I've noticed this with my three youngest sons, because they live in an adult's world,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they have, their older siblings are teenagers and adults. Our two oldest daughters are married, so then they bring son-in-laws, home. And our dinner table conversation is adult conversation. So my three youngest boys live in an adult world most of the time,
Mm-hmm.
and they ask questions about things that they hear their siblings talk about, like
Mm-hmm.
vasectomies and liposuction, and I'm just like, okay. But
Mm-hmm.
in so like dating, they have teenage siblings, so we're talking about qualities
Mm-hmm.
in a spouse, so they have a lot of questions, but it's made me realize that if they're asking questions, adult like questions, you need to give them the information,
Yeah.
and not say you're too
Yeah.
young,
Yeah.
you just give them the bite-sized information. But the
Yeah.
same way, like our grandson, he thinks he's one of the uncles and he wants to be treated like them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm always speaking to him as if he were 4 or 5. Like, oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's the soap. Don't rub your eyes because it'll
Mm-hmm.
burn,
Mm-hmm.
because that develops relationship.
Yeah.
And I just really like to speak to babies as if they were
Right.
little adults.
Yeah. When a lot of times people shorten their vocabulary when talking to infants, and that I try to tell people that doesn't help them develop vocabulary and language. That's not, if you go straight to no. Now when you're serious, sometimes the less the better, because you've already laid the foundation. But when you're training, which takes a lot more effort, you do have to give more words and give more language. And that's the exhausting part.
It is.
That's the tired part for the mama who's at the end of the day. She's tired, she don't have all the words. But then that's when it comes to you having to regulate your own self to still be consistent and doing the same thing.
I
You
think,
mentioned that. Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, I think one of the phrases that I recently heard that has helped me a lot with my boys when I don't have the words anymore is to say, obey now, understand
Mm-hmm.
later. And that kind of bookmarks it, that this has been an issue, and I need to remember to address this when we're both calm.
Yeah.
And I have had time to think through how I'm going to present this. But for right now, obey now, understand later. And I even use it with my teenagers. And sometimes, because I know they may not understand this decision for 10
Mm-hmm.
years. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll be right back. My grandson's up. I'm gonna bring
Okay.
him.
Okay. Mm-hmm. You guys, how are you enjoying this conversation? I see the chats going. Let me see. I got a couple questions here. Okay, we'll get that question in. How are you enjoying this conversation, you guys, with Miss Ruth Ann today? I'm enjoying it. I'm loving it. I see your comments here. So good. 100. The skills of self discipline. Golden. Hi. Okay, now I have to concentrate because I love babies. I gotta concentrate. I gotta focus, 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 focus. Okay, love it, amazing. Okay. Hi, you have a good nap. It was a good nap. Oh, you look rested. Your eyes are wide awake. I'm only gonna have your grandma for a couple more
Yeah,
minutes. I'm
it's
not gonna
okay.
kill
We
the
can
time for
keep
her.
as long
Okay,
as he's quiet, we can keep going as long as he's
okay,
not too disruptive.
okay. So I love that what you just said. You said obey now, ask questions later. That is so, 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 so good because it's firm. It gets the point across, but it also says we're going to come back to this for further explanation. We're not going to just drop this off, right? I love that so, 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 so much. Um, so I had a question. Let me go.
So
I don't
I
want to.
think one of the things that obey now, understand later does for our family, because we always want to be conscious of building relationship, right?
Yes.
And we don't want to be authoritarian where you just obey and you can't ask any
Hmm.
questions. So when we say obey now, understand later, it leaves it kind of open-ended where
Yes.
you're like, we're gonna come back. Like this
Yes.
is not just an obey. I heard what you're saying, but now's not the
Hmm.
time. So it leaves the possibility of building relationship and it doesn't feel as authoritarian
Yes.
or as
Yes.
crushing, like they're not being heard.
Right. I love that. I love that because it makes it like you said, that's not like an authoritarian thing. It's not like a do as I say. Your feelings doesn't matter. I hear like what you have to say doesn't matter. Like it lets them know that they still matter, but they do have to be obedient in this moment. And truth be told, like I learned a lot of my relationship with God, my relationship with Christ through my interaction with the children. So there are times when God tells me this in this moment I need your obedience. You're not going to always know why. You're not going to even always understand. It could be something as simple as you're driving home and the Holy Spirit tells you to go left. You know what I'm saying? And so therefore, just out of obedience, you don't know why he's saying to go left, but you go
Yeah.
left. And then later on you may get understanding as to why he said to do so.
And which
It's
is an
such a loving thing.
important and it's such an important skill
Hmm.
for our children to learn because it's going to help them in their Christian walk when they
Yes.
know that they won't always understand something, but obedience is what's required.
Yes, I love that so much. So I want to get to a couple of the questions that
Okay.
I got in my question box. One question is, do you find boys less bent towards doing housework?
Yes. Um, so, we have an old farmhouse and the reason I'm like, yes, for sure is my kitchen is probably, 50 years old, the cabinets.
Mm-hmm.
And in the last 5 years, we have repaired so many things in the kitchen cabinet and it's like barely hanging together. They're bent, the doors don't close.
Mm-hmm.
And I started being like, what's going on? And I'm like, oh, the boys.
Mm-hmm.
So when they're doing kitchen work, it's like gymnastics or, they're just not housekeepers by nature. But
Mm-hmm.
my goal is I want my daughter-in-laws to love me. So
Yeah, yeah,
I'm going to teach them the basics and we're going to keep working on it. Plus they need to contribute. They need to do
mm-hmm.
dishes. But definitely they have less of an eye for housework.
Yeah. First of all, their body has so much, they need movement in every single, sometimes they just moving for no reason.
Yes.
So housework can be like a restraint for them. So
I oftentimes, when I have more than one boy in the kitchen, I really need to sit where I can't see them because I just
Yeah.
criticize too much. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're gonna break
Mhm.
that. And there's the other
Mhm.
thing, like having dishes that you're not going to cry about if they get broken.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, thrift store dishes
Mhm.
that can be replaced. The only thing is, they make a mess if glass dishes break, and
Mhm.
we don't want them to get hurt, but that's how they learn. If you drop
Mhm.
a glass dish on my
It's going to
tile floor,
shatter.
it's
Yeah.
going to shatter. And
Mhm.
if that's what it takes for you to learn, I can buy all the 50-cent glass, you know, drinking
Uh-huh.
cups at the thrift store. I'll just keep buying them, and you'll keep
Mhm.
sweeping up the glass and until it sinks
Eventually.
in.
Yes.
But if I sit
Yeah.
here and say, careful, that's glass, I can only do
Yeah.
that so many times and just
Yeah.
wear out that
Yeah.
record.
And I find that boys learn from doing. They learn from it actually happening. That's how they problem solve to do things better. And some children may learn the first time, they may learn the 10th time, but eventually they will learn. But for boys, that literally is the way that they actually learn, by doing. So, yeah, them glasses are going to shatter.
Yeah.
um, okay, so what can you do if you have a child who's bent towards laziness?
So not motivated. Um, I would use that language and
Yeah,
say you need to find your
yeah,
motivation,
yeah,
spin it in a positive way and find out what does motivate them.
yeah.
Some children are extremely motivated, but the root of lack of motivation is usually lack of dopamine.
Mm-hmm.
So lack of
Mm-hmm.
motivation usually looks like something is they're getting an artificial high. Yeah, you can't have that. That's too little for your mouth. Um, and I'm not pointing fingers, or I'm not saying this is the case. But if we understand where work ethic comes from and motivation comes from, it comes from a dopamine hit.
Mm-hmm.
And dopamine is that feel good hormone, like the
Yeah,
reward hormone.
yeah,
And if a child is getting a dopamine hit from the screen, like, video
yeah.
games or something
Mm-hmm.
like that, then other dopamine hits, natural
Don't.
dopamine
Yeah,
hits, are going to not
yeah,
compare at all because
yeah.
nothing in your house, nothing you can do
Mm-hmm.
can compare to those artificial highs that you
Yeah,
get from a flashing screen. And so understanding that when a child lacks motivation, they just are not in tune with what makes them feel good about
yeah,
themselves, and stripping everything else away until a job well done starts giving them a little bit of a dopamine hit.
yeah. Oh, that's so good. That's so good because you can't compete with the screen. So
No,
how do
no.
you handle that? Like, would you recommend using screen time as a reward or just
I'm a
minimizing it?
I am a my little boys have no devices. The only
Mm-hmm.
screen time they get is the
The
family
family
TV.
TV.
And now that the NFL is over, um we don't have any screens on school days.
Okay.
Zero. And then on the weekends, they can get up and they can watch their show. That
Mm-hmm.
is their time.
Mm-hmm.
My older children, like my 15 and 17-year-old, they have their own devices. And so at 15, there's parental
Yeah.
controls and they get to learn to manage their screen
Mm-hmm.
time. Um, so they kind of ease into it and you
Mm-hmm.
see how each child is managing it, but as long as they are developing work ethic and character, like my little
Mm-hmm.
boys are, there is zero screen time. Your dopamine hits are going to come from family, from playing a
Yeah.
game,
Yeah.
sports with your siblings, from a job well done, milking the cow by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to learn to tap into those dopamine hits before
Before
you
yeah.
ever know that there's something like online games or
Mm-hmm.
social media or anything like that.
I love that. So it's no competition.
No,
You do it God's way. That's just the best. I love that. How do you handle complaining?
So I have this, I say complaining is always heard, but never rewarded.
Mm,
So it goes back to I hear what you're saying. I hear that you're saying this is too hard and you don't feel like doing this. And oftentimes when you repeat it back to them like that, they're like, oh yeah, that sounds silly, you know.
mhm,
So oftentimes that nips it in the bud for my children, but they also know that they can't push it too far because complaining just means that you need more practice.
mhm,
And
mhm,
so we're going to practice washing dishes until you can do it with a good attitude. And if that means that we're going to rewash all of these dishes until your attitude improves, because the goal then be not does no longer is to get all the dishes clean.
mhm.
The goal is now to have a good attitude. Um,
Yeah.
so for example, oftentimes when I'm working in the kitchen with dairy, I will have, a bucket full away to go to the pigs after school. And if the child verbally complains once, I'll say, I hear you. I hear you saying this is a heavy bucket. Why don't you go get two buckets and divide it and take two trips? It won't be so heavy, you know. Um, but you have to do it with a good attitude.
Mhm,
That's kind of a warning.
mhm,
And if the complaining continues and the eye roll or the whole body roll, I'm like, okay, well, now we're working with an attitude, and when you're done with this, come see me, and I have another chore for you. And I can do that as long as it takes for that
yeah.
child to begin to work willingly and they know
Mhm.
it. Does this mean that they're probably having an attitude all the way down to the pig pen and they fix it just before they come back into the house?
Probably.
It probably does.
But they get it. But
But they
they
get
get
it.
it.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
yes.
I love that. Okay. How do you train children to have a servant heart without them becoming bitter and feeling like they are servants? You know?
Okay, so a good example of this is laundry in our house
Mm,
because we don't we don't have you do your laundry, I do my laundry, or dishes or cooking, it's all for one and one for all. So for example, with laundry, we do laundry twice a week. Mondays and Fridays are our laundry days. The kids know that. Um, so they come home from school and it's time to fold the family's laundry and put it away. And so I often have like five children around the table folding laundry, but recently, let's see if we can find you your passy. Recently, okay, I'm falling apart here. I'm being a
uh-oh.
hot mess. It's okay. Both teenagers had plans after school,
Mhm,
and the three little boys were left with all the laundry to fold. And they were like, oh my goodness, this is not fair. Why do we have to fold all of Mitchell and Hadassah's laundry? And I said, wait, let's stop and think. When you were babies, like we've had this laundry system for as long as we've been a family. When you three were babies, who do you think was folding laundry then?
mhm,
And they're like, oh, Mitchell and Hadassah. I'm like, yeah. And now they're growing up, and now you'll get the bulk of laundry folding, right? Because they folded your laundry when you were too little to fold it, and now
mhm,
you fold theirs. And I said, guess what? When you grow up and you have a job and things to do, it'll be all back to mom's folding your laundry, but
mhm,
everybody has folded each other's laundry. You're not the first sibling. Um, so kind of giving them like an overview of, hey, guess who cooked for you when you were too little? Your big sisters were helping me in the kitchen,
yeah.
So it kind of helps if you give an overview of how our family has always worked. Before you
Mhm,
could remember, somebody was cooking for
yeah.
you, and now you're cooking for them. And
Yeah.
so and I often say we're a family.
Mhm,
If one of us isn't happy with the way something's going, let's hear about it. Like we all slow down,
mhm,
and see how we can make it better. But we're all for one and one for all.
mhm. I love that. I love that so, so much. Um, You guys, this has been wonderful. Miss Ruth Ann, is there anything else that you last minute questions? I'm going to close this out in a bit. Let's see. One question I have here is how do you start this? How do you implement this work if you don't have a homestead? If you're just having a home
So
without animals inside?
my biggest advice to you is find a hobby that
Mm-hmm.
takes up all of your time, and you're like, I'm sorry, I'm in the middle of this. You're gonna wash the dishes. And then, like, because here's my thing. If I don't have a hobby, like if I don't have my knitting to pick up after a meal, I will be in the kitchen and I'll, without even thinking, I'll just do the dishes. But if
Mm-hmm.
I have my knitting, then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go knit and the boys need to wash dishes. It's their job to wash the dishes and put them away.
Mm-hmm.
So figure out, the chores that you want them to do and then stick to it. And if you need to, in for myself, it doesn't feel right if I sit and prop up my feet with a book while chores are getting done. But if I'm
Mm-hmm.
sitting and my hands are
Mm-hmm.
busy, it feels like I'm working with them.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like they're folding laundry and I'm relaxing, or I'm in the tub taking a bubble bath while they're doing all the laundry. Um, you have to make it feel like you're all working together without taking over every
Mm-hmm.
part and micromanaging every part of their chores. But there's enough housework. If you even have two children, you can find
Mm-hmm.
enough housework to develop this skill and develop their work ethic. You're just going to have to lower your standards of how it gets done.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to have to find yourself a hobby that you're real passionate about, because that'll help you ignore how they're getting it done.
Okay. Someone asks, how do you address disrespect?
So disrespect, children don't, oftentimes they don't know what that word
Mm-hmm.
means. So making sure that you first teach them and give them the opportunity to correct their own heart.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say, if a child, looks at me and says, I don't want to do that, right? um, I will look straight at them and say, when you say, I don't want to do that, that sounds like disrespect to me. Can you find a way to say it so that I don't feel disrespected? Like, it's not like, oftentimes we approach disobedience and disrespect as if children already know all about it and they're consciously choosing to
Mm-hmm.
disrespect or disobey. And it's not the
Yeah.
case. They have to be taught. They have
Mm-hmm.
to, like, you have to have the dialogue of that. When I say XYZ and you do ABC, that's
Mm-hmm.
disobedience. Do you want to try that in a different way, or do you want to try it using different words?
Mm-hmm.
We always, or I try to always give them the benefit of the
Yeah.
doubt. Like, they're still learning what disrespect is.
Yeah.
And they're still learning to control the words that
With
come
their
out of
mouth.
their mouth.
Yeah.
Um, so giving them a chance to do a do-over because those words felt very disrespectful.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to try them in a different way? And that just trains them to not be always respectful, but to think about what they're saying, to
Yeah.
think about the words that are leaving their mouth. But
Yeah.
it's very often children, even teenagers, do not choose to be disrespectful. They just have a lapse in judgment. And when you remind them that those words felt disrespectful, they
Mm-hmm.
are very often, like, they comprehend that and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, so it's training. It's
Yeah.
training
Yeah.
more than it is like punish to obedience or
Mm-hmm.
discipline into obedience. It's just a whole child training.
Training, right? And if you have children that have issues with impulse control, sometimes it could be like their mouth can seem like it's a slick, slick mouth. I have a one of the children at homeschool. She's 5 years old, and she could be a bit sassy, but she also has impulse control that we're helping her through. Okay, and I do the same thing. I'll say, okay, the tone that you just used, it sounded like it was a bit disrespectful. Can you ask me that in a different way? Or I remind her, remember when we talked about disrespect? That's what you just did was disrespectful. And then she'll change it up, you know? Sometimes she may not change it up. And that's when I realize, oh, you're doing this
Then
on
it's a heart
purpose.
issue. Yeah, then
Yes.
it's a heart issue.
Yes. Yes.
Then it's a whole different story. But I have one that struggles with impulse control too, and I was blindsided by it because when he was little, it was, physical impulse
Mm-hmm.
control.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I didn't realize that it would carry over into verbal
Yeah.
impulse control.
Mm-hmm.
And we're working on that, and I think that's where I really learned that simply giving them another chance
Mm-hmm.
goes a lot further. And sometimes I have to give them the words to say. Like,
Yeah.
like if you say these words, your brothers are not going to be upset with you. Like if you can get the same results just using a different tone and different words.
Absolutely. That's a great tip. Um, Someone asks tips for balancing me as a mom, wife, learning how to manage the home and the best system for us, while also trying to incorporate our 4-year-old.
A 4-year-old, sometimes it's just survival mode. And I would say with a 4-year-old, they're probably going everywhere I go.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Simply because they are likely at that willing but not able stage.
Mm-hmm.
So they can't really do a lot completely on their own. Um, but they can help you with many, many things. And oftentimes, what happens with younger children is we forget to build
Mm-hmm.
relationship, and relationships are built on shared experiences. So, the more time that you can bring the 4-year-old with you to do things so that you have a relationship in place, that would be my goal for the 4-year-old, is
Mm-hmm.
just simple shared experiences so that I have a relationship to build everything else on.
Awesome. Okay. I like that. I like that. My takeaway from this, you guys, tell me your takeaway in the comments. My takeaway is relationship. I feel like that is the running thread between it all is relationships. Um, which is children listen when they trust you. They obey better when they have a relationship with you and they trust you. Um, I love that. Miss Ruth Ann, I thank you so much. I thank you for taking this time out with me to conversate with me today. Now I wanted to do a giveaway of your book, but
Oh, yes.
I didn't factor in how to do that. I would usually do it on my phone. I have an app to do the giveaway on my phone.
Right.
So I'm gonna have to do this in a different kind of a way, y'all. I'm so sorry. Um
Why don't we create a reel, collaborate on
okay.
it, and then run it for the next couple days and have people comment and share on the reel.
Okay.
And then, I mean, we could maybe even, like, if you save this live,
Mm-hmm.
it'll go on your feed, and you could maybe simply ask people to comment and share this little live that we did,
Okay.
and to be entered to win.
Okay. Y'all
That
hear
might be
those
easier.
instructions? Okay. So what we're gonna do is I'm going to actually we're going to do a reel because Instagram does not favor long content. So I'm going to post this whole if you want to see the whole video, I'm going to put that on my YouTube. Success with long content on Instagram. But what I'm going to do for the giveaway is we're going to create a reel. So look out for that reel. It's going to be me and Miss Ruth tagged on it, and it'll have instructions in the comments for the giveaway. I'm going to give away 2 of her books, and when I tell you all the questions that you guys had in the comments that I didn't get to, I'm pretty sure it's answered in her book. She also has samples of chore lists in the book. She breaks down according to age, the appropriate. Oh, hello, Winston. Winston, right?
Yes.
Yo. So anyway, focus. So So yes, you do want to grab this book. It is so good, you guys. It's it takes this conversation further than the small, conversation that we had today. This book is great. So I'm going to create a reel. Look out for that reel, and then the instructions will be in the reel. Okay. Thank you guys
All
so
right.
much, and Ms. Ruth, thank you so so much.
You're very, very
I'm coming
welcome.
to one of the homestead conferences this year. I've made that commitment to myself. I'm
Where are
coming.
you located? Where
I'm
do
in
you live?
Maryland.
Okay, so you wouldn't have that far to the Virginia one.
Yeah, I saw there's one in May and there's one in October. So I think the one in I already have a something for that same weekend for the one in May, and I was so mad. But I think I'm
Well,
gonna be in Tennessee that weekend.
there's also the one in Virginia at Polyface Farm for women. That one's
Oh,
really fun. That one's in November, usually
okay,
early November.
okay, okay. I'm close. I'm like about 3 or 4 hours away. I could drive that. That's no
Oh
problem.
yeah,
So I will
yeah.
be meeting you this year.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Okay, you guys. So thank you again. Thank you guys for joining. Look out for that reel. Make sure you follow me, follow Miss Ruth Ann, and look out for the reel for the giveaway. Good day, Winston.
Can you say bye bye?
Bye
Can you say bye
bye.
bye?
Bye, honey.
Can you say
See you later.
bye?
All right.
Thank
Good day.
you.
Thank you.
Mhm,
Okay.
bye.